Hello, good morning. This is Albin Renauer, and this is the first of many videos I plan to make to help consumers be informed of how the law affects them and what they should do in their states to get politicians to be more accountable to things that could help you and your families. So today we're going to look at the National Consumer Law Center's No Fresh Start. It's called, it's a survey they do of the 50 states about what would happen if suddenly debt collectors, let's say like a medical debt or some kind of horrible debt happens to you and you're trying to start over, and they call it fresh start. And this survey every year looks at the different states and how well they protect a couple of things: your wages and your bank account. And you'd be surprised at how this breaks down and kudos to them for doing this kind of a survey. I've done 50 state law my whole career, and this stuff takes time to do. And what we're going to look at real quick here in this video is the idea of exemption laws. I've tracked exemption laws my whole life. I used to do 50 state tables for the bankruptcy book that NOLA puts out. And I'm well aware that every state is vastly different. There are some states that are very debtor-friendly, and there are some states that are really not. And you might be surprised that Michigan is hard on debtors. Texas was actually quite good. So we're going to look at more things like that. A couple of things that we're going to look at is the protection of wages. Can a creditor reduce the debtor to below the poverty level? So there's a map and a table of state protection wages, and we're going to look at that. And the purpose of this is also for you in the states that don't do enough. You should be able to point to this and point to your state legislators and say, hey, you should look at other states and be more like them. And then it's the family home, the Homestead Exemption. That's widely different from state to state. And then the family car, that's also important. Some states are very reasonable about that, and some states aren't. And you'll see there's a map on that. And the basic amount in a bank account. Some states hardly let you protect anything. Some states do a very good job of that. And then household goods. That's the last exemption category. And then we're talking about states that have improved things and what remains to be done. So overall, they had this map of the strength of state protections of family finances overall. And there's all 5 categories. That's the wages, the house, personal possessions. And so you can see, state of Michigan here, my home state, gets an F. Texas gets a B. Some things gets an A, particularly wages and homestead. And California does well on things like bank accounts. You can see here states that you might think were liberal and New Jersey, whatever. No, they do a very poor job of protecting debtors. So let's look at some of the other tables. You should look at this. I'll put the URL in the comments. And let's see. So this is how they grade. They look for certain values, like what's the exemption amount. So this is, and here they changed a few, because states are getting better. And wages, this is how they grade things. Anyhow, so you can go back and look at that, and why exemption laws are important. We should know about that. This is really good. Yeah, NCLC is a great organization, and I encourage you to take time to read this whole report. I won't go through it, but I do want to get through a couple of these maps because I think that's what's interesting here. State protection of wages. Okay, Texas. They are notable because they ban seizure of wages entirely for consumer debts. Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. So you can't seize wages in those states. Pennsylvania has like a loophole for rent, but anyhow, most states aren't like that. And in most states, they can seize your wages. And that's a lot of reason people start looking for a bankruptcy attorney, because when their wages start getting seized, they say, oh shit, now shit is hit the fan. And so, so that's interesting. You probably didn't know that if you live in one of these states, you're used to whatever. You're in Texas, you might think, oh yeah, wages can't be seized. And you move to another state, wait, it's very different. So this is one example of, how it's law, especially in this regard, is local. Very different in different states. And let's look at the next one. Oh, and here's the statutes. This NCLC is awesome. This is a freely available report. I'll give you the link, like I said. And they have this amazing summary, which is really just fantastic. keep this stuff up on my website, sort of, but, why do it if they're doing it? So I'm just going to point to this, because this is really where you should go to look this stuff up. This is an amazing resource, and kudos to the great people who run this organization, because it's a great resource. Okay, now the next category to look at is protecting the family home from creditors. Texas and in Florida and some other states have a absolute homestead exemption. They can't take your home if you have debts there. And so those are notable. And a lot of the agrarian states, the populist, and Texas, their homestead was part of their whole constitution back when they were the Republic of Texas. You couldn't take the land, couldn't take the damn farm. So in Florida, that's one of the reasons OJ moved to Florida when he was threatened with civil suits. After all that, he got a big mansion in Florida, and they could never take that no matter what. So that's still true today. And there are some states that do have a dollar cap, but it's so high, like, Massachusetts. The value of the exemption is up to $1 million. And in California, it's pretty high too. So they get a B, but still in some of these places, the exemption amount, the limit is so high, it's almost like an absolute exemption. So here's the summary. These are all the states with no dollar cap. It does have limits of acres, but that makes sense. And then here you can see Arizona has very high, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, and Washington, and then California. Okay. And then here's states you should look this over. And if you live in one of these states, it's chintzy. Look at Michigan. You can lose your home in Michigan really easily. So not good. And then the next thing is the family car. Again, Michigan, what up there, huh? It has a very poor car exemption. And meanwhile, Texas has a great one. So if you live in Michigan or any of these states up here that has a crappy auto exemption, talk to your damn legislatures and point to these other states. And so here's what you can point to. Texas, $20,000. Arizona, $15,000. Colorado, all these places. Yeah, that's a good amount. And then you get down here to places like Michigan, and it's $1,000. Really? Okay. So, and here's protection of family bank accounts. Again, Michigan gets an F. So does Texas. In this case, California gets a B. The only state that gets an A, it looks like, is New York. And I have a little explanation about all this. And here, automatically, you get, say, $4,000 in your bank account is protected. And then California, $2,100 is protected. Not much, but, and then in Nevada, it's kind of this thing called a wild card, which you can use for different things, including bank accounts. And then we go down on this and to Michigan, more protection law. And then, okay, one more thing about the Michigan. You should remember that Michigan has a separate set of exemptions for bankruptcy than it does for general collections in court cases. Michigan is an unusual state in that regard. Usually the exemption system for state bankruptcy exemptions and regular collection exemptions are the same, but Michigan, in fact, has two different exemption statutes. And so some of these numbers, like for auto and car, they're very low in general, but for bankruptcy, they're much higher, like $42,000 in Michigan for house, and the car, I think, is $4,000, $2,000 if you're in bankruptcy, but that's only if you're in bankruptcy. So just wanted to put that in there. Finally, household goods, again, widely different. You can see which states are good, which states aren't. And here again, down to the table, California, all these states, all necessary household goods. So that's pretty broad. And then there's some that have high caps, $80,000. And then they have low caps, including, again, like a place like Michigan, $1,000. That's not much. All right. So if you live in one of these crappy states, you should talk to your legislators, and you should look at the link to this report and study it yourself. And then here they have a report card for each state. And if you live in one of these states that has a failing grade, and it has a summary of each state. This is super useful. And We're going to go down here, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, and this is a great service that these guys provide. And let's get down to Michigan here, and then we'll wrap this up. So, in Massachusetts, there's that thing, live and protect your home. But here in Michigan, your home, your car, cherry, bank account, household goods, $1,000, wages, they can take most of them. So, anyhow, know that this is here, and I'll be back with other videos talking to you about great resources that are on the web as they become available. This report, again, just came out in December, and I highly recommend you perusing it for your pleasure. And if you live in one of these states that does a bad job of protecting you and your family, write your legislature and send them a link to this and say, why aren't we more like Texas or whatever? Okay, this is Albin Renauer from LegalConsumer. I'm Calvin, originally from Michigan, and we hope you find this information useful. Thanks.